Hello everyone, this is Mike and welcome to session 11 of our Cognos report training series. In this session we're going to discuss the data warehouse schema, and it's important to deep dive into the schema so we can understand how tables talk to one another, how databases interact with one another, and where to place our focus when we're trying to learn and become proficient as a report developer or a SQL programmer. All right, so let's get started. So basically, the schema is the blueprint, and it's important to understand how that blueprint works, especially when you're attempting to solve business use cases with DII. Right? So it will be a map of your database. It describes what tables exist, what columns each table has, the column names, the data types and rules, how the tables connect, the relationships, and the use of primary keys and foreign keys to allow different tables to talk to one another. Okay, the primary key is basically the main ID for a record in a table. Each row in your table will have a unique key. That key is assigned during the ETL process where we're pulling data over from the web UI and then processing it through business logic and placing it in the appropriate database and tables. So at that point, we're assigning keys to each row we collect from the web UI. All right, those keys are unique, and no two rows can share a key, all right, within a specific table. The foreign key is a way to point to a record in another table. So you will see relationships. For instance, if I look at the storage hierarchy, what are the relationships? You have the storage array, like I just mentioned, the storage node, the pool, the volumes, the metadata, and the disks. Well, in those tables, to maintain communication between all of those different tables, the lower portion of the hierarchy will contain the foreign keys. The highest device on the hierarchy will just have a primary key. So when I look at the storage table inside of our schema, it's only going to have ID as its primary key. All right, so that's in our inventory database. Okay, so when you're talking about inventory, it's current data. So we have IDs that are associated with each individual row in storage, and then we will have a primary key and a foreign key in the storage node table, right? And then as we funnel down through the storage hierarchy, each one of those tables will have a similar structure, but will provide support for the upper layers of the storage hierarchy. And we're going to go through that. We're going to actually build that out. So primary foreign key relationships are important. Not all tables in the data warehouse can talk to each other, right? There are definitely use cases that we try to solve with our data warehouse and Cognos environment. And we have to understand, and that's why we're doing a deep dive into the schema, where the limitations are, but where where are the best practices? How do we apply the best practices when we create SQL queries, and how to focus and learn quickly so that you can increase your skills to provide value to our customers. All right, so let's go over to our sandbox tenant, and we will talk about how we can quickly build out a relationship between tables. It's not too difficult, but I do want to review the schema, which is part of the web UI, and get you looking at that more and more so you can gain an understanding of all the different concepts we have available. All right, so let's do that. All right, so I'm going to click on my sandbox tenant, which is our lab, and I'm going to go over to Cognos, go to content. All right, we can actually click new right here, new report, and then click on create. First thing we do, always, no matter if you're building a drag and drop report or SQL, you have to click on a source. So click on select source, go to packages, and then let's click on inventory. I'm not interested in time series data yet. I'm interested in just current data, so that's why I'm clicking on inventory. Now, to find the schema, we can go to the web UI. And once the web UI launches, we're going to navigate up to the top right, and there should be a question mark up there. There it is. Click on the question mark, click on documentation, navigate over to observability on the left, scroll down to reporting, and then scroll down to schema tables. When the main page pops up, click on schema tables. It'll kind of throw you at the top of the content or the table of contents inside of your schema. And I want to navigate down to inventory. Again, there are two types of data sets inside of our data warehouse. We have current data only, and then we have time series data. Inventory is current data only. It's updated as of the last ETL that has run. Now that can vary throughout the day depending on which tenant you're accessing within our environment. So when you look at reports and you run current data, it's not always going to be today's data. It might be last night's data. All right. So keep in mind that that will vary greatly. But when you see the timestamp associated with any of the data tables in our schema, that'll tell you basically when the last time the ETL ran, when it's current data. Okay, so keep that in mind. So we're going to focus on inventory and we're going to focus on the storage hierarchy. So I'm going to scroll down to storage. So here is the database inventory database and storage, and I'm going to click on that. And like I said earlier, you're only going to see one key in here. It's called ID. That's the primary key. Every table in the data warehouse in inventory will have an ID. Even tables in the time series databases will have ID as well. Okay, not all of them, but most of them that are attribute based will have an ID. Okay, so ideally when we look at our databases, we will have attributes and metrics in certain places, and I'll get to that as we drill into the schema. So here you go. At the top of the hierarchy, there are no foreign keys, right? So storage is at the top. You're only going to see ID. That's the primary key. And I want to connect to storage node, which is the next layer of the hierarchy, and storage pool. All right. So to show you how those relationships work, we're going to do that in real time with our SQL environment. Okay, so I'm going to come over here. I'm going to navigate to my toolbox and drag a SQL icon over. Okay, once I get, a list icon over to my page first, and then I'm going to navigate to queries and drag my SQL icon over. Get that parallel bar, drop it into the Cognos query, and now you're able to create SQL. So let's go over here, connect to pass-through. That's our syntax. That's the most performant syntax. Please use that as the best practice. Next, we're going to select the data source and click on inventory. I'm going to double-click the SQL icon, and I'm going to build out a very simple SQL query. All SQL queries, as I've discussed in previous sessions, start with select. The next up is a from clause. I'm going to add my from clause. Again, you're querying data from the database, so the select will pull the data, and from will identify where you're pulling it from. Okay, very important. It's very simple, but it works really well. So I want to pull from storage. I always give my tables an alias name so I don't have to keep typing out some of the real long table names that exist in our schema. So right here, it's easy. Storage is pretty easy, but I want to use the best practice, assign an alias so that I don't have to type any more than that, right? So S is the name of the storage table. I come up here, type in S period name. So this is the table. We use a period as a delimiter so that I can add something after S, which will identify what I'm trying to pull out of the database, okay, and out of the table. So when I go back to the schema, I scroll down to storage. I have other fields. We have name. That's the name of the storage array, right? And it will be your primary field in most tables. Most dimension tables or in inventory, just about everything has a name. Okay, so name is a common field inside our data warehouse. So you'll see that a lot. So I'm going to do name as array. You can call it storage name, cluster, anything you want, as long as it meets your customer's naming conventions and criteria. Okay, next up I want to join. I'm not going to do anything yet other than just make sure this works, right? It validates successful. And please use validate often so that if you run into you type something wrong or it was an improper structure or you improperly created structure in your SQL sequence, just keep validating so that you don't get ahead of yourself and then it's hard to find syntax errors and things of that nature. So that's another good best practice. So now I want to add a join. This is how I actually combine tables together. I use join, right? And there's different types of joins that I'll get into as the course continues. But right now we're just going to use a full join. That means it will be a one-to-one relationship with any table that I connect to, right? So I'm going to join a storage node. Okay, storage node, and I'm going to use SN as my alias. Now notice that my best practice, just use the first letters of each portion of the table, okay? So SN is storage node. And then I want to join it on something, so I'm going to go SID is the storage ID equals SN storage ID. Again, primary key from storage, foreign key from storage node. That's how they talk to each other. Again, think of the storage hierarchy, the pyramid. You start at the top with storage, and then the next layer down is storage node. Very cool. Now we want to add storage pool. So in the data warehouse and in our schema, this actually grew over time. So, they didn't design everything and it was all perfect. It kind of grew over time as we added more and more features and functionality to the data warehouse. We had to accommodate those things by using bridge tables. Now, what's a bridge table? Well, if I go down to storage and I want to connect storage to storage node, well, that's easy, right? Because there's a storage, that's at the top of the hierarchy. Storage node contains storage ID, right? But the thing is, once we added storage node to the mix after the fact, we had to create some sort of mechanism to combine it to storage pool, right? Because that's the next layer in the storage hierarchy. When this was built, we only had storage and storage pool. We didn't have storage node. We added storage node after the fact. So here we build bridge tables. A bridge table, the way to identify it is look for the word TO. All right, so when you see TO in a table, that's a bridge table. That means we added some functionality after the fact. All right, so there's a whole lot of them. All right, and it's everywhere in this data warehouse we have bridge tables, okay, that allow us to connect new things together as it grew over time, right? So bridge tables are simple. What do they contain? Well, they just contain keys, right? So storage node to storage pool, if I want to connect my storage node to my storage pool, I have to use this bridge table called storage node to storage pool. And in there you have storage ID, storage node ID, and storage pool ID. These are just foreign keys. So this table just contains foreign keys to allow more tables to communicate with one another, right? A genius way to build out functionality in the data warehouse. So I like the way this works because it makes my life easier when I have those relationships all built in, right? So what we're going to do now is add functionality here between storage node, and storage pool. So I have to add the storage node to storage pool table first. So let's do that. So I'm going to join storage node to storage pool. And I reference this with an alias called SN2SP. Okay? And then I type my on statement. And I'm going to stick with the same conventions. I'm going to go with the primary key first, SN.ID equals SN2SP storage node ID. Again, using the primary key and the foreign key to create the relationship. Let's validate. Yes, it works beautifully. Next up, I want to add my storage pool. Right? So storage pool is SP, and I want to join that on SP ID equals SN2SP, and it's storage pool ID. Remember the schema when I went up here and I looked at storage node to storage pool, right? There you go. Storage ID, storage node ID, storage pool ID. That's how I'm building this. It's very important to understand how these tables relate to one another. So let's just get back to where we were here. And the concept of how things grow within a data warehouse, and we have to accommodate that growth. So that's the key here with these tables. So let's go back. All right, let's do a validate. Make sure everything's successful, and then I'm going to have a comma here, and I'm going to type in SN name as storage node, right? And then SP name, notice they all have name, as aggregate, okay? And I can validate. And remember what I said before in previous sessions, when you build out a select, if it's multiple columns, each column has to be separated by a comma until you get to the last column in the table, and that's not. You just drop the comma. So that indicates to the select query that that's the end of the structure, okay? So when we validate that, it should be good. When I click OK, it's going to populate the Cognos query, and then we can do a right click and view tabular data, and we should have something in here, okay? If you don't get anything, sometimes the ETL is running, or you just there is some, I know there's some things going on in engineering right now, so they're probably working on the tenant. If I don't get any data, then that means it's just in that process of updating the database or the tenant itself. So that happens a lot. So I'm not getting anything right now, and that's probably the case. And it's easy to test. You can just do a quick test on some other things, but when you don't get any data, it's usually because of that process. And again, this is a demo tenant. They work on it all the time. So in this case, we don't get anything, but that's basically how you structure your query. You can also do groupings. So when you group and you group by specific columns, you can group by 1, 2, and 3, or you can actually do the name. Okay, like that. Okay, or you can use the ID. Sometimes when you're running with large databases, it's better to use numerical objects versus character-based objects or string-based objects. So most of the time, best practices are to use numerical objects when you're doing anything in a computer. You want to focus on numbers as much as possible. So by grouping by the ID, will make the query a little quicker. All right, doesn't mean you have to do it all the time. I could just do 1, 2, 3 like that to group by all the 3 things. All right, and then it'll still work the same. Let's see if we get anything. Hopefully something comes through soon. Okay. Nope, still in the process of being updated. All right, so that's again, you can do what you want to do depending on what the use case is, but if I'm going to group by something, all right, and grouping will come into play as you build more queries down the road. It'll make a huge difference when we get into some of the training along, basic queries and then some, intermediate and advanced queries. I will be talking about grouping all the time. It's very important when we build out use cases. Okay, so in this case, I'd probably group by everything. All right, and then it'll allow me to keep things structured properly in my query. But that's how you would do it. That's how you would build out a simple query using the schema as your blueprint to build out solutions for your customer base. Okay, so I'm nearing the top of the hour. I'm going to continue with the schema. There's more we need to learn. We're going to look at how you can basically build a report to print out a lot more detail about your schema. Right in Cognos. It's pretty cool. So I'm going to give that to you in the next session. And we're going to talk about some other relationships like time series relationships. And again, I'm not focusing on building SQL queries. I'm focusing on the schema so you understand how tables communicate with one another. And hopefully this session gave you some insight into that. And we will continue building that concept over the next several sessions. And I think you'll get a lot out of it. So thank you for joining. Thank you for your patience and listening to my instruction. And I hope to see you in the next session.